Cool. All right. So this is number 12 of our 12-part series. So I do want to kind of preface this before we get started that I'm not entirely sure what we're going to be doing in following weeks, but I do know that we're planning something. I think we're going to start it next week, but I'm not entirely sure. So we'll see about that. I know I do have a schedule change as of next week, so there may be a time change with regard to this. So hopefully that isn't, you know, uh, schedule, I guess, dependent for you. But I'm actually going back to teaching in the classroom next week. Yeah, so I'm going to be teaching actually board drafting, which is kind of wild. And then in the fall, I'm teaching again too, um, but it won't be conflicting with my daytime hours. So maybe by the fall we'll be back to this hour time slot.
Where are you
But
teaching?
anyway, oh thanks. Thanks for asking. I'll be teaching at Saddleback College. It's a community college down here in South Orange County. It's like a few minutes away from where I live, which is nice. And then in the fall I'll be teaching at Orange Coast College, OCC. Um, so that's kind of nice. It's part of a career move that's sort of important to me, being like a sole, not a sole proprietor, but like a solo one-man firm. And, it's pretty common. You see it a lot. People who run their firms also teaching in the classroom, one or two classes a semester or something like that. So that's what I'm going back to, and I'm very excited for it. Um, so our subject today, we're going to talk about, since this is week 12 of 12 parts, we're back onto construction and evaluation. We're going to talk about information flow during construction. So the conversation, what I prepared, it's a little bit more of a truncated format. So I hope that we can get as conversational as possible. I have folders pulled up with um, databases of RFIs and ASIs. I can pull up other stuff too if we get into conversations around CCDs, change orders, and that stuff. But mostly what we're talking about right now, or at least what I'm focusing on, is information flow, not necessarily like the business of construction and evaluation, where we talk about like the changes in valuation, things that cost more, cost less, so on and so forth. But we certainly can go there if you'd like to. So let me go ahead and share this. And make sure I've got you pulled up on the side. Okay, and just let me know in the text if you don't see my screen or anything like that, so I can track that. And let's get going. So yeah, we're talking about RFIs and ASIs for the most part, and other clarifications. So basically, RFI is request for information. ASI is architect supplemental instruction. Of course, the whole premise of this being that nobody creates a perfect set of drawings. So if you happen to come across an architect that says that their drawings are perfect, I'm not saying you should, I would challenge them to prove it. Um, so these sorts of things happen. We miss adding a detail, or the material isn't called out in a series of details of flashing, or a paint finish is missing. All of these things are um, important to recognize in the realm of construction and evaluation, or rather construction administration, because we have a symbiotic responsibility between us and the contractor for making sure the information is communicated. And I'm actually going to kind of stop sharing here for a moment just to like emphasize this point real quick. Um, in construction, when we do bidding, right, it is the contractor's responsibility to ask the questions of the set that they see that there's a gap. It doesn't mean they're going to be perfect either. They're not going to catch everything. But let's say, for instance, they catch that there's a header missing across a really wide opening on one side of a building. That could be a very expensive line item, but it's missing in the structural drawings, but it's showing in an architectural sheet. Do they price it or do they not price it? And they have to ask questions during the bidding process to help tease that out. but they could miss it entirely. And so that becomes a question later on. So we'll talk about that being a price item or not a price item when we talk about RFIs.
But you said that it
Um,
would be the contractor's responsibility to see that error and ask about it.
if they see it, it becomes their responsibility to ask. And that's what the bidding process is about. The formal bidding process is their opportunity to ask the questions that they've identified where there are discrepancies in the drawings. Um, but we also have a communication flow process in construction that allows us to catch all, even if, we missed putting it in the drawings or they missed it in their bid. So really, that's kind of like if you've ever read, there's a book called what is that book? I have to get that book name. It's like a thousand ways to write a change order or something like that. And it's a pretty common book for contractors to like train their young people to read through drawings and to try and like create change order opportunities. And that's kind of the game they play. It's a really interesting balance, and that's one of the areas where like architecture and construction can be adversarial. But if we all start off like with the right attitude, like we're both honestly trying to get the most accurate bid, we're not trying to start with like a healthy bid and make it even healthier and earn more profit later on. Generally, construction goes pretty well. And generally, in my career, at least when you're working on reputable projects where the AIA contracts would be in use, um, you're working with contractors who know this, and they're not trying to screw you over, but they're also not trying to lose money either. So let's get into it. We're going to start by talking about RFIs. Um, Basically, RFIs being requests for information don't always stay a request for information. This is really important because what I just mentioned, if there's a whole beam missing in the structural drawings, they need to be able to size it to price it out. So they could submit an RFI and say, what is this? And if it happens during bidding, they can get the bid item in there without requiring a change order. If it's discovered later, they may submit an RFI, and if they didn't have a dollar value, in their bid for that beam, then they would need to transition it to a change order after the RFI is answered. So that's kind of really critically important. But most RFIs just come through because they don't exactly know where something should go or what color it should be. And these are things that you know, or how the flashing should interact with like a fiber cement panel facade or something like that. Like there's an infinite number of possibilities of what generates an RFI. Um, but most importantly is to know that RFIs, simply put, their process stops once the question is answered. And if there's a dollar value attached to it, a change order would follow. We're going to get into that in a moment, but basically, they're going to be used anytime there's an unclear project requirement. So, what exactly do you need? Where exactly do you need it? What stipulations are there to its installation or manufacturing, even if it's a manufactured product? Do you want, for instance, like if they're ordering custom windows, do you want the vinyl to be white, gray, black, brown, that sort of thing? So these are all RFI type questions that don't necessarily change the value of the project. If there are conflicts in the contract documents, so let's say in a floor plan of a classroom, which I have an example of later that I can show you, there are TVs on walls 1 and 3 in this classroom, but then in the electrical drawings, they're shown on walls 2 and 4. That's a conflict that an RFI should be generated in order to kind of finish coordinating that and make sure they're installed in the right location, but doesn't affect the contract sum or time. And then lastly, unforeseen conditions. So it could start with an RFI, and usually it does. I've been in a situation where storefront was meant to go into an exterior wall. Turns out there was a column that was dropped right in the middle of it. And so the contractor sent an RFI and said, "Hey, what do we do?" So we had to basically issue a new storefront schedule, elevation with new dimensions, split it into two. And ultimately, at least in that project, it wasn't considered a cost item, thankfully. So that works out pretty well. A lot of this is kind of straight out of the videos, but I'm going to try and be more conversational about these bullet points than I normally do in the PrepARE course videos. But like, what is exactly the architect's role when it comes to RFIs? Most importantly, our job is design intent, right? So if the storefront, for instance, needs to be split, the RFI should be asked because the contractor can't really decide, do I just split this and have this column be dropped in the middle of it, or does the architect need it to respond to some design schema on the elevation that this column now disrupts, right? So this is all critical that especially when you're in a more complex project where you're using AIA contracts, contractors are more understanding of this. They'll take it back to the architect to make sure that adaptive conditions are actually considering the design intent. It is our responsibility to provide additional details where details are missing. One of the things that probably stays in RFI territory without kind of leaking out into change order territory is like flashing or paint colors. If for some reason an architectural set went out without any paint, usually there's going to be some sort of line item thrown in on the bid that they're going to use. I'm blanking on the term right now. Why am I blanking on that? Contingency. Um, so they're going to put in a contingency item for evaluation of paint, and then ask in an RFI later about where does the paint go, what colors where. Um, and then correcting discrepancies. If there's, like I said, the discrepancy about the TV locations, if it's discovered at some point that there's an elevation difference in the horizontal mullions from storefront to storefront, those are the types of things that RFIs could or should be asked. And in many cases, they are asked, but it doesn't always come through as an RFI. And so we're going to get into like whether it's an ASI or an RFI in a moment, but I do want to just outline this by saying RFIs are generated by the contractor. These things, if they're discovered by the architect, are oftentimes going to be an architect supplemental instruction. Um, and after those two things is when they would ultimately become a change order if there's a dollar value attached to it. So that's kind of good contextual knowledge. Um, cool. Yeah, I need to move some windows one moment. Okay, cool. So the RFI process, right? The RFI process is not so different than so many other things. And so now that you're kind of jumping into construction here pretty soon, you're probably familiar with this, right? You'll have some sort of user interface, most likely, if you're using new Forma for construction administration. You'll get an email that says the contractor has sent you an RFI. If you're not, you may just get an email with a PDF attached that says, here's this RFI. If you're working on a very small project, for instance, I've worked on like ice cream shops and donut shops. They may just send you an email, and that is the RFI, and we'll talk about that too. Um, but what you need to know for the ARE is that the ARE assumes that this is an AIA contract project, which means that they are following proper construction administration protocols. So they're going to send you an RFI, and there are some best practices attached with that. We'll talk about some of those too. But anyway, you're going to receive an RFI. It'll come in either through a new forma, through your email, or some other form. And then you'll address the RFI first. if for some reason that RFI relates to a consultant, you'll forward that along to the consultant. You may choose to respond to the RFI yourself first, or you send it to your consultant, let them respond, and then it comes back to you. This is not an excuse to not review the RFI at all. Um, in many cases, you may have no comments, you may write nothing, but you still need to read that RFI to understand what your consultant is doing, and you should be evaluating if it has any impact on the architecture itself. So, like for me, now I'm kind of going from ARE back into practice now. For me, one of the things I tell everybody on my team during construction, including the contractors, is I care about these things. Usually it's what you see, right? So a light fixture, the color of emergency components for the fire alarm system, where they're located on the wall. These are all things that I care about and I will comment on, but I don't necessarily care about the model of fire damper that's going to be embedded into a rated wall through a plenum. Um, so that's, communication kind of can be managed in practice that way. So anyway, you're gonna forward it to your consultant with or without your comments. It'll come back to you, and you'll either apply comments or not apply comments, and then you'll respond back to the RFI to the contractor. Um, Now, this is another thing that is important about the architect's registration exam. The architect's registration exam is very strict about the line of communication. Um, Hopefully, you've seen it time and time again in various diagrams, reading textbooks, or listening to videos. I have it written in my PrepARE courses. It's mostly in the project management course, but it exists in practice management, and I reiterate it in the construction and evaluation course as well. That the contractor, the general contractor, and the architect are the two people who talk to each other with regard to construction administration communication. um, a subcontractor, a person like an electrical lighting subcontractor or someone like that, is not supposed to talk to the architect. They will send their RFIs to the contractor. The contractor will forward the general contractor, sorry, to the general contractor, and the general contractor will forward it to the architect, and the architect will forward it to their consultants. This is critically important because the architect is meant to be the bottleneck, not a bottleneck, but like they're meant to be the point of communication for all things with regard to the design and construction. That's our duty. That's our responsibility for oversight, so to speak. And that's where we catch things. This is where we'll decide if the electrical engineer sends an RFI response back and says, "Oh, well, we're going to change this model to that model, or this color to that color, or this size to that size." Well, then we would need to evaluate if that's even acceptable for the design. What if it's a specialty lighting system? What if it doesn't fit the ceiling, type or something like that? So all things are critical. All things critically have to pass through the general contractor and the AOR. Um, so now, at the very, very end of it, though, I want to point out that I noted here that at the end of the response of the RFI, the contractor will process and submit a change order if it's applicable. So if the response to the RFI is we're changing these light fixtures, or we need four more light fixtures in this space, well, that's going to be a change order. And so we still respond to the RFI and say we need to add four more. And then we respond by saying submit a change order. Um, so then the change order goes into a different tracking system. I mean, same tracking system, but different category. But the RFI then is closed out. Um, all right, so managing RFIs, some best practices with regard to these. It is really critical to be clear, concise, and thorough. And I have an example in one of these slides of a project I worked on where the contractor just sent me emails as RFIs with whatever thoughts he had in his head for a half an hour that morning. And it was absolute chaos. Was it an AI project? No. Did he have to use formal RFI processes? No. But would it have been a best practice to do so? Yes. So regardless what system you're using, it's important to be clear, concise, and thorough about what questions are being asked. It is notable to say that one single question per RFI, but there's a caveat to this. Um, I would qualify one single question per RFI as being scope and discipline dependent. So if you have a question about the lighting package, right? The entire purchase for the project of all the lights that will need to be ordered from whatever lighting distributor the contractor is using. If the question comes in about that and they're asking questions about your linear shop lights that are in the back of house, and then your coffer lights that you have in bathrooms and hallways, and the specialty lights that you have over reception desks. That's okay. They don't have to all be separate RFIs as long as they're within the same rough scope area, which in this case is lighting, and the same discipline, which in this case is electrical and architectural. So there may be electrical questions in there that go to the electrical engineer, and there may be architectural questions that go to the architect. It's not really the contractor's responsibility to split those, because it's up to us to decide, do I want to respond to this from the architectural perspective, or do I want to respond to this from the engineering perspective? And so we'll pass it to our electrical engineer, and then they'll pass it back, and we'll finish all of our responses, so on and so forth. So that's critically important. The one question is great, but also we don't want to bury our contractors in a ton of paperwork, in a ton of paperwork creating like new cover sheets for that question, for new cover sheet for 2x4s, new cover sheet for 2x2s, new cover sheet for specialty lighting. That's just not necessary. Um, there's nothing that says that you have to, nor cannot use both graphic and narrative responses. So for me, this is more of a practice-based bit of advice. I think I would suggest using both graphic and narrative responses wherever possible and practical. Um, there's a lot of talk in the industry right now about sketches, for instance. Have you encountered using sketches or issuing new sheets yet?
No, I don't know what you mean by sketches here.
Okay, good. Thanks. Thank you for that. So basically, I'm going to pull up an example. Uh, this one here. So this was a RFI that came in about a fire riser condition, and basically an entry step condition. So it's all like this concrete. They wanted to raise it 6 inches. And so when I talk about a narrative response and a graphic response, this is a narrative response that says this is what we need to do in order to respond to your question. But then also I think it's critically valuable to include graphic responses. So we actually modified via a sketch the detail that was in the construction documents. It's not a, super, high end, like drafted response. It's a sketch. And oftentimes in the field of architecture, in construction administration, this will have a title block. It'll be labeled SK01. We didn't need that level of granularity for this project, so I just kind of issued it as a graphic attachment, which is attached to my response on the RFI. So you'll see that happen in a few different ways. Some firms will issue sketches only, where anything that's modified in the drawings after the first addendum, after bidding, then it'll just be issued as a sketch. They never modify the drawings themselves and reissue sheets, whereas this is more of a practice particularity. I issue full sheets. So you'll see here, uh, this is an example of this one was an ASI for exterior elevation colors, where I went through and changed all the elevation color callouts to be corrected, and I issued it as a set of full sheets. Um, so for me, I like to make sure that my drawings are always up to date with any change that has to happen wherever possible, where a project requires it to. That's not always true. Like when I'm working on really small, like the retail locations I've worked on and stuff, like it's just not worth it. Just do it. Just do a sketch instead of a sketch. So that's a sketch. Um, Actually, let me think about this from the ARE perspective. Um, the ARE most likely uh, will follow the sketch protocol, where a sketch will be issued, and and it will I don't think it will say that it's wrong to issue a new sheet, but the official process that is, I think, currently practiced at like the AI level for construction administration is to issue sketches whenever there's a graphic change.
So they would be inclined to issue sketches rather than update the sheets themselves.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
That's a good one. I need to dig into that probably and figure that out for sure. But I would say it's a relatively new practice to update sheets. It's also very industry dependent too. So like some industries, like DoD projects, for instance, I think they won't let you do that. They want sketches. And so since that's the traditional approach, I would say if you don't know on the ARE, if you don't know, then like which approach it should be, go with the more traditional approach, which is issuing sketches. Use standardized templates or construction administration tools. So like I said, the sketches will probably have a template cover sheet to put a sketch on. You'll duplicate your detail, you'll modify your detail, you'll put it on a sketch sheet, and then you'll print it out and you'll attach it to your RFI response. That's essentially how that looks. Um, some challenges. One of the things that is kind of problematic in construction administration is the high volume of RFIs that may come through. There is a time value attached to RFIs. So in responding, I believe it's 5 days or maybe 10 days is what's listed in standard in the contract. So don't quote me on that. I would say if you're writing down a note on it, make a note to verify that within the contracts. I can, if you remind me, I can check it at the end of this chat. Um, but there's a time limit. So if the contractor just like bombards you with a whole bunch of RFIs, you might not meet those time limits. So it's important to set an expectation of how much, what the flow of RFIs can be. If they're moving too fast, let them know. Um, but for me personally, I'd rather have them give me everything right up front. Like if they can give me every single submittal for the project the day construction starts, that's what I want for submittal reviewing. Um, Poorly formulated questions. This is what I'm going to show you, I think, in the next slide. While and I have a whole story about this, so I'm actually going to circle back to that when we get to the next slide. Delayed responses, lack of prioritization. This is really critically important. You're going to have a priority list. Your contractor, every time you have an owner architect and contractor meeting, usually they're going to tell you which ones are hot. Prioritize those, get them done, get them out the door so that you can kind of squeeze in the low priority ones in between your other work tasks and kind of keep your schedule much more balanced. That's like a personal, management thing. Probably won't be an ARE question sort of content, but that's my advice to you. Like get those high priority ones out so that you can slot in between this meeting on this other project or, this staff meeting, I can respond to this question about floor tiles or floor base, because it's not hot. Um, Miscommunication between contractors and design teams. This is critically important too, especially during OAC meetings where some RFIs can come up about what you talked about. Um, The interpretation of drawings can often lead to confusion. Words can be stated or emails can be sent, or just the communication of the drawings themselves, or specifications. So it's kind of a coordination effort. So you may respond to an RFI not clearly saying that the specification is correct and the drawings are wrong. Um, and that can cause problems. So that's why clarity is absolutely, absolutely critical. So I did talk about the one question at a time thing. I do want to double back on that real quick and just say that that one question at a time is not a requirement, and that's what's really important. Is it a best practice? Yes. So this is where people, I think, are going to get tripped up on the more qualitative questions of what is the best action you should take. And I'm going to talk about what happened on a project of mine here right now. So this is an actual RFI text that I got in an email. This was for an ice cream shop, tenant improvement. No, this one was Palm Desert. So yeah, this was a tenant improvement plus some new construction around it. But basically, this email comes through and it just the way it's formatted is absolute chaos. You kind of can't really tell which ones are new items, which ones are attached to the item above. We've got things about finishes, locations of details of transitions. We're talking about there are misters. So is that plumbing? Is that electrical? There's a pump, that's electrical. They're talking about water. Then they're talking about color trim board, an equipment plan showing microwaves. We're talking about location and heights of countertops. Where's the countertop tag? Another equipment thing. So anyway, what I'm getting at is it's absolute chaos. Um, this was not an AIA project. So like technically the contractor can send that. And if I'm being honest, this was the least professional and most frustrating experience of my entire career working with this contractor. And I just asked him, I was like, hey, can you give me one question at a time? Like, give me all your electrical stuff, give me all your plumbing stuff, give me all your architectural finish stuff in separate emails, or even just in separate sections. And he would not do it. But what's critically important about this is what I want to get at with this is practice-wise, not ARE, in practice. Um, you don't have to sweat it so much because your drawings are your drawings and your contractor is supposed to follow your drawings and anything that they don't follow in your drawings is their responsibility. So in this case, I kind of soured the relationship with the contractor by trying to get him to speak my language instead of just trying my best to speak his. And in practice, my advice would be just try to respond to this as best you can. And if they get it wrong, it's fairly defensible in a lawsuit situation because this is not really very much an admissible, clear communication. So it would be understandable that an architect might not respond to this purely accurately. Um, but in on the ARE, and when it comes to like real practice when you're working on an AIA project, it should look a little more like this. You should have a subject that says clarification on doors, right? There are three questions in this RFI. It's not one question, there are multiple questions, but they all have to do with doors. They're talking about material of doors. Is it wood or is it hollow metal? They're talking about which ones and types it applies to, and then they're talking about how it applies to those lights and what core they're going to have, right? So fairly clean. It's not so that's kind of like the narrative I wanted to pull out of this is that it's not one question, but it's one family of questions. Does that make sense? Do you have any questions or confusion on that?
Um, I think my question here is, would it have to start like this? Like, is the standard um, template typically to start with all these mark numbers?
Like for an RFI specifically?
Yeah.
Not necessarily. I mean that's going to take any direction that the contractor needs to take. So in this
Okay.
case, like there were a lot of affected door marks, and
Yeah.
so they wanted to list them all. But if they're asking a broad question of all the exterior doors on the project are listed as wood core doors. Did you mean wood core doors, or are they supposed to be hollow core, per my understanding, and
Okay.
expertise? And then you could
So,
respond by saying, yes, all exterior doors should be hollow core.
okay. So they could have maybe skipped enumerating all of the marks and just said, like, are all of the wood ones supposed to be this certain way?
They very much could, yeah.
Okay.
There isn't a standard language. That's where just clarity of communication comes into play. Um, should they be on an AIA project? Should they be giving you a cover sheet with a clear narrative? Yes, that is the requirement. Um, but outside of that, how they want to communicate the issue is up to them.
Cool. Yeah.
Um, so let's quickly go into ASIs and how they're different. ASIs, so you can think of like RFIs as like contractor generated and ASIs as architect generated to some degree. That's not a completely true statement, but it's a mostly true statement. Um, for instance, um, the architect may be responding to an RFI about, let's say, doors. And I may notice that the door tags for the full window pane door and the vision light door are swapped, right? So then I issue an ASI and I say, hey, contractor, I noticed this thing. These two door type marks are swapped. These ones are supposed to be full light and these ones are supposed to be vision panel. Um, that is that's an architect generated ASI. In theory, unless the quantities of those doors are tremendously different, it should, kind of roughly equate. And that's where we as architects have to make a judgment call. Like, is this going to be a dollar item or not? Are there only two of these doors, or are there 200 of these doors? That's a consideration. But if we evaluate that it shouldn't make a material change in the contract sum, we just issue the ASI and say, hey, contractor, here you go. Here's ASI 001. These doors should be swapped. So that's what I mean by architect generated. Where that statement isn't entirely true is, let's say in the owner architect contractor meeting or while you're doing a site walk, you notice that vision the full light door and the vision panel door are just on the opposite door in a classroom or something like that, right? And you say, oh, this is the first classroom where the doors have gone in. They're actually supposed to be on the other side. You could just issue an ASI that says, hey, these two doors need to switch for the rest of the classrooms, and please switch it on that one. So that's an architect supplemental instruction that maybe the contractor asked about or you noticed on site. Um, could anyway, yeah, sorry, I didn't create a scenario where the contractor asked, but like let's say the contractor noticed and was like, "Hey, architect," as you're going through on site, and was like, "Hey, architect, this looks weird. Why is there a full light here and a vision panel here?" And it's like, "Oh, well, no, they're supposed to be backwards. I'll give you an ASI for that." You know what I mean? Did that clarify? Did I make it more confusing for you?
Maybe a little,
Okay, I'm
um,
sorry. So what all I'm saying is like the
but
the
yeah,
contractor can
it's
ask a question that
uh-huh,
that incites an
that
ASI as well.
instigates. Okay, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Um, so and then the key about ASIs is as long as the architect believes it isn't going to be a change in contract sum or contract time. Um, so that can happen at any point. ASIs you can drop in at any point, as long as it's not built already. So these are going to be used for design intent clarifications. Let's say the storefront was listed as uh, I guess I don't know, like an anodized light gray, and it needs to be anodized dark gray or something like that. Then you could have them change that as long as it's not a premium color. Yeah. Um, Minor corrections, this wall says it's supposed to be painted blue. It's actually supposed to be white. That wall is supposed to be painted blue, something like that. Again, as long as it's not a massive change in area, that could make a difference. Or if it's a premium paint color and it's going, in on three walls instead of one. Unforeseen circumstances, of course, too. So not terribly different than RFIs. The difference is we just have to be absolutely critical that when we are issuing an ASI, that we understand that it's not going to be a change order item. The components of an ASI, you should have an agreed upon format. Like if I'm going to issue an ASI contractor, what do you want? Like, do you need a cover sheet? Do you need a new drawing? What is the requirement for that ASI? So if you're using the AIA documents, you're going to issue a G710, which is the cover sheet for ASIs. It should have all attachments necessary, so that includes sketches, revised sheets if necessary, or updated specifications if anything changed in those documents. And any and all disciplines that are related to it should have the response. So if I realize that these four premium pendant lights that are supposed to be over a reception desk are actually over top of a conference room desk or a conference room table. Well, I need to get the electrical engineer to update their drawings to put them in the correct location, and then I'll update mine to put them in the correct location or whichever documents were incorrect, and then have it issued. And then this stuff, I'm going to go through this kind of quick because I want to show you some examples and just kind of walk through some things. But these are the challenges with ASIs. It could be misinterpretation because communication is hard. Overuse of ASIs. A lot of times architects will try to just say like, hey, I totally forgot all expansion joints in on the plaster. So here you go. Here's all the expansion joints. But if that's not priced in, then it actually needs to be a change order, not an ASI. Precision instructions. So you could get overly precise or not precise enough. Usually overly precise means like it's going to be an extra cost item. Supporting documentation. Some of the concerns are like if I move the TVs, but the electrical drawings didn't change, well, then the electrician is going to be the first person working on that. So they're going to run it where the electrical drawings show it, not where the architectural drawings show it. And then coordination with the contractor. That's just making sure that if I send an ASI, make sure that it's understood, make sure it's received, and that they have all the information they need. So here's an example of an ASI. I talked about expansion joints, but this is a time where on a project we basically missed a few of the expansion joints. This project's budget was I think about 38, $39 million. So when we got through here and we said, you can see this orange down here, there's an expansion joint we missed and wanted to add there. There's an expansion joint we missed, wanted to add here, missed, wanted to add here. And there's an expansion joint we missed and we wanted to add there. Right. So there's like 4 or 5 expansion joints on a $38 million project. That's not a significant cost line item. Um, and this is really critical. This is where the judgment call really comes into play. In practice, judgment is important for these sorts of things, but on the ARE, you can rely on the fact that the magnitude of these judgment calls should make the answer relatively obvious. I'll kind of give you a good example where we had I was working on a project, not unlike this one. It was maybe a $50 million project. And we had 2 or 3 hospital system executives, 2 or 3 project managers from their side. We had a principal partner from the contractor. We had 2 project managers, 2 project engineers. We had 2 principals from my firm, project manager, and 2 technical staff in a meeting room. And we're all talking about a curb cut. And we had this maybe 20-minute long curb cut conversation about whether or not it should taper or if it should be like rised up to the cut where the detectable warnings are. We sat there for 20 minutes, and then finally, the project manager of the contractor was like, "Guys, this is like an $800 item. Like, you either want it or you don't. Just make a decision because we've spent 16 times that just sitting here talking about it." And so that's really important. But on the ARE, you won't experience like you'll experience something more like that, where you won't experience something where it's like really on the fence. You know what I mean? Um, sorry, I gotta plug my headset in. I have one more example, and then I want to talk about open stuff. Oh, that was the only example in there. What did I want to pull up? I wanted to pull up. Oh, here's the television locations thing. They basically the correct television drop locations weren't shown in the electrical drawings, but they were in the architectural drawings. We caught that during construction, and recognized that as the electrician is going through doing their work, they're going to run all the conduit to the locations that are shown in the electrical drawings. So we sent an ASI, a non-material change update, where we relocated the location of the TVs, um, updated them in the electrical drawings, but we didn't need to update them in the architectural drawings. So that's why we sent that one. Um, Another reason why it's important to have let's look at these. Oh, let's go back to these. Another reason why it's important to have different threads for each um, topic is because it's easier to find the information, right? I can now look through all of the RFIs on this project, which again, I said this was about a 38, $39 million project, but this wasn't even the end of it. But we had 343 RFIs. Could you imagine if I was trying to find the response to where we moved a sink 2 feet to the right in some casework RFI if I didn't have a record of what each RFI was about? That would be a nightmare. Um, so that's why we kind of try to make sure that the subject matter of each item is pretty well described on the title of the RFI. I just have PDFs of this, but if you have it in Newforma or some other construction administration software, it's going to look the same way. The subject should read pretty clearly what that RFI is going to be about. Um, So that said, I can pull up any of these items if you'd like to explore a little more what these could look like. If you have specific questions, I can try and find an example of an RFI or an ASI that speaks to your question. What questions do you have?
I'm not sure. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a it's a funny thing. But yeah, the flow of information, like I said, the most important parts on the ARE, if I could just reiterate the biggest takeaways. Um, Information flows from the general contractor to the architect, and all of your subcontractors, they only talk to the general contractor. Your subconsultants only talk to the architect, and the GC and the architect talk to each other. That is like
Mhm.
critically important. You almost are guaranteed to get a question about that. But then the other stuff is like a little bit more um, best practice management. You may get an RFI that has a series of questions, and it may ask you. Yeah, I didn't do examples today. My apologies for that. But it may ask you, based on this RFI, what items should you include in your response? And it may say narrative only, or include an updated sketch, something like that. Or update the specifications only. Those are ways that you'll have to evaluate what an RFI is, or if the RFI is even clear enough to answer.
And so in the case that it's not clear enough to answer, would the action be just to say this is not clear enough? Like, can you clarify?
Yeah,
Okay.
you can close out the RFI and just say like just respond to the RFI and say, please clarify your questions and close the RFI. RFIs generally don't get versions. So what you'll see here is like they all say RFI whatever and stops, right? It's pretty rare to see this one like a revision. So for instance, the first one, this is rated wall bottom plate, right? So use fire retardant coating over pressure treated sills. Submit selected fire retardant coating for review by the design professionals, right? So then they submitted it, right? And that's what this is. And so then we said provide product data as part of a submittal, right? So it's rare to have RFIs kind of go further unless you request something. But if you say this isn't clear enough, like re-ask it, just close the RFI.
And so, in that case, it would still get logged as its own numbers.
Well,
Or
actually,
sorry,
what
as
I
okay,
so de yeah, sorry. Depend. I should revise my statement. If it was something like what I showed you before, where there are like four different disciplines, I would respond by saying break these disciplines apart and submit a separate RFI for each one, and then I would close that RFI.
Mhm.
If it was a RFI that was submitted about the the pendant lights or something like that, and I just needed something else asked, I would just call the contractor and say, "Hey, can you update this?" And then I would keep that RFI number. I would just replace the RFI with the new updated one.
Okay,
Yeah, because for me, what I don't want is a gap where um, it jumps from um, like 94 or here well there is a 93, it's just out of order. But like I don't want a gap. I don't want to see 80 and then 82 and not know what happened to 81. That's critically important to me.
so when you say close the RFI, do you mean basically remove it from this folder, like delete it and then reuse that number? Or do you
So
mean just leave that file there and move on to the next number?
so that's a good question. Remind me, what type of projects do you work on?
Um, Healthcare of all
Okay, so
scales
bigger project. Okay. So
and
yeah,
small
you probably
renovations.
are.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're probably using Nuforma, even for your small
Yes.
projects, because you're most
Yes.
likely, yeah. So like in Nuforma, when I say close, what I mean is like they're gonna send you an RFI and it will open the RFI, right? So when you respond to the RFI, you're gonna fill it out on the PDF, save the PDF, sign it, whatever you want to do, date it, attach it back to your Nuforma RFI, and you're going to return and close, I think is the term it uses. It's like return
Sure.
RFI and close.
Right.
Um,
It's part of the software.
yeah, in the event of this one, like 104 and 104R1, that might be just return RFI and leave open so that they can correct it or send like the additional information. It's been 8 years since
Yeah.
I've used Nuforma specifically, but practice-wise, this is like if I was just doing PDFs, I would just have like a open folder and like a closed folder, and when it's done, I would just move it to the closed folder.
Sure. Okay.
Um, Yeah, what other questions?
Um,
Curiosities, advice.
yeah. Well, what are the maybe slightly related, slightly tangential items that might be related to this ASI RFI conversation that we haven't really touched on, if anything?
Um, oh, that I was talking about earlier.
Yeah, if anything comes to mind.
Um, so I guess the change order piece could use a little bit of clarification, right? So, like I said, RFI should be, I have to ask a question, you answer the question, boom, we're good, right? But what happens when it is a cost item? Um, that's where it gets a little sticky because even in new format, I don't think there's really a way to like take an RFI and create a change order. So out of it. So I think like the best practice that I've used, if I recall in my history, is like respond to the RFI by saying submit a change order. And then it's the contractor's responsibility to track that technically. Um, because you have to think very clearly about what is actually on your plate. Your plate is what's in the drawings and what has been asked about it, right? So you're done your job when you've answered the question, and answering the question with submit a change order is answering the question. Outside of that, the contractor's responsibility to send a change order if they want to get paid more money. So you
Okay.
don't need to track that on your end.
Okay. Gotcha. And so then what form would the change order take?
It depends. In the AI for so if you're not using AIA contracts, they're just gonna whatever documentation the contractor and the owner are using, they're just gonna update it or send like an addendum to it. If you are using the AIA documents, I think it's like G712. Hang on, I can pull it
Okay.
up. Let's see.
But there's a form.
Yeah, there is. General content, contracts. Where are my contracts? General files. Oh, have them in here somewhere. Oh, there we go.
Mhm.
It's a proposal request. Okay, so yeah, that's right. So the AIA contracts, call them proposal requests before it becomes a change order. So the contractor will, they'll use the G709, they'll fill out all the information, they'll attach all their attachments, and they'll send it to the contract or they'll send it to the owner and say like this is a proposal request for uh the owner requests these things. And it'll become a modification to the contract documents, and the contractor submits this proposal, right? And then they write about what it is. So it does the proposal request step, and then like once it's approved, it becomes a change order, and then the contractor will load it into their system and say this is now a change order on this project for the X number of dollars, and then they can bill
Okay.
against it. Yeah, I knew there was something weird about the contracts with them. I just want to double check that these other ones, which I think are all RFI ASI things. Uh, it's continuation sheet, payment, change order. There you go. So the G701 being the change order, G709 is the proposal request. The owner submits the proposal request, the contractor responds to the proposal request, and then the change order is filled out and approved.
Okay. Got it. And would we have to memorize these kinds of form numbers?
It's valuable to spend time with them, but they're not complicated forms. Like this is pretty clear. It'll tell you in the question. It won't just say G701. Like it won't just say you
Okay.
received a G701. What do you do with it?
Yeah.
It'll say the contractor has submitted change order AI document
Okay.
G701. Yeah. So
Okay.
no, it's you don't need to memorize this, but it certainly doesn't hurt to have a functional base understanding of it. Oh shoot, I just realized we're after 1 o'clock and I have a meeting.
Okay.
Um,
Go.
so I
Thank
do
you.
have to get going, but get your hands on these. I think NCARB still provides draft versions of these. Uh, if not, I think we have the ability to distribute them. I have to verify that.
Okay. Cool.
Okay,
Well,
so look
thank
into
you.
that. Okay, cool. Thanks. Talk to you soon.
Yeah, have a good week.